I'll just provide this retort because I'm the one who brought it up and you're the one who asked the question, yada, yada. Maybe if Sean has an opinion, we'll let him chime in. But for me, having watched his film coming out of college and the player that he is now, and I'm real big on this because this is how I was taught football. The NFL coaches and, one NFL coach and several players who have really taught me more about football. You don't try to take a player from one position and completely redefine him in the NFL. Sure, there are some players who are able to do that, to make that transition. More often than not, they're not. And I think two good examples of that, not just Stephon Anthony, but in Saints history, Stanley Jean-Baptiste, a guy who had that prototypical corner size for the man press that Rob Ryan wanted to play, but was not an experienced player in that position and was just completely lost and never adapted to an NFL level of playing. And just to switch leagues and sports for a minute, it's kind of like Anthony Davis. Anthony Davis is, to me, biased fan, and to a lot of other people, is the best power forward in the NBA. Yet when you play him at center, which is right now, Alvin Gentry is running what's called small ball. So he's running usually 3 to 4 guards on the court at any given time with Anthony Davis. Then Anthony Davis has to line up against these true, real, don't meet him in a dark alley type centers like DeAndre Jordan, and he simply can't fight that. DeAndre Jordan puts up over 20 rebounds against Anthony Davis because you're forcing him to play a position that he's not really made for. And that's my problem I have with Anthony. I don't think it makes him stupid or ignorant or unable to play football, but to expect a guy to go, to me, a way on the other ends of each spectrum here, from an A and B gap run-stopping attacker to a read the field, play a QB spy type Tampa 2 coverage linebacker, to me, just was extremely unwise. Now, if you want to do the whole possibly rush the passer thing, I can kind of see that. But to me, it seemed more along the lines of DA wanted him to play an intermediate route defender who has the ability to provide support in the run. And that's just not who he is. Maybe he develops in that after 2 full off seasons of training with it. I mean, we can only hope so because you hate to waste a first-round pick. To me, it's just I thought the pick was erroneous from the beginning. If you knew where this team was going, you got to be able to know that this guy simply is not fitting that mold.
Yeah, that's definitely fair on that. To a degree, it's kind of like trying to ask Brandon Cook to be Michael Thomas. That's not your skill set. Sure, he's got a 40-inch vert, but he's still a 5'10" wide receiver.
Yeah, that's another thing I try to tell people. I mean, there's a difference between a flanker receiver and a split end. One lines up on the line and is slower and bigger. One gets to take 3 steps back and then uses speed immediately. But no, more people don't understand that. We need to start having football 101 lessons. Sean or Brian, do y'all have any thoughts on the Stephon Anthony situation?
Listen, you guys, if you've diagrammed it pretty well, it's one of the mysteries to me. It's kind of the enigma. He certainly looks the part. You don't want to put the guy in a scheme he's not. To me, I guess, Deuce, this is a guy who was calling your defensive plays last year. He was the quarterback of your defense, and now he's not seeing the field. If he's an A or B gap guy, have him run into the A or B gap. Clearly, that's not what Dennis Allen wants in this defense. It's kind of like I get frustrated when last year, now granted this was last year under Ryan, you had Kid Kai who had, 30 sacks in 2 years in college, and you're getting him to drop back into coverage. Dude's a pass rusher. Go get the quarterback. If Steph Anthony's a gap stopper, stop at the gap. I mean, don't try to, put a square peg in a round hole. Get a guy to do his strength. So the whole Stephon Anthony thing, I mean, you diagrammed it perfectly, but it's been confusing to me. I thought the guy had all the potential in the world last year. I was actually very high on him. From going to calling the plays to not.
Well, heck, I still feel that way, though. That's the thing. I still feel that way. I mean, if Rex Ryan was to land a DC job somewhere this offseason, or heck, even Rob Ryan, any team really that runs a similar style of that one gap 3-4 that has a man coverage outside, so Stephon Anthony doesn't have to worry about zones or cornerbacks and protect anybody. He can just play with the field in front of him, as they say. I think he has mountains of proportion.
One of the reasons he was drafted so high was, hey, look at his speed. He should be able to get out in coverage. I mean, that to the organization's credit, one of the things that blew them away was his speed.
Yeah, speed's great. But here's the thing with speed. Speed doesn't help you if you don't know where you're going.
No, that's probably the biggest reason he's not playing.
And Anthony might have the speed, but And I try to teach people when I teach them the basics of football. Let's say you're a cornerback and you're in a man-covered system. Your job is to play the guy across from you hip to hip. You're not staring back down at the quarterback. You're simply sticking to the guy. When you see him make a movement, you turn your head and try to get the ball away from him. That's man coverage. Speed can do that for you all day long. But when you got to play zone, especially in a Dennis Allen defense, which runs what's called fire blitzes, which is bringing an extra 1 to 2 guys per side, you then have to carry an area of the field between 10 and 15 yards wide in every direction in a circle. That's very difficult for a guy like Anthony who's used to running downhill. He doesn't have that whole peripheral thing set up in his baseline. He's not thinking, what's going on behind me? Where is Delvin Breaux? Where is Damian Swan? Do they have this quadrant of my zone protected, or do I need to go left? Do I need to go right? He hasn't ever been trained that, to my knowledge, to be able to process and run that style of defense. And they're so vastly different. There's a reason you have zone corners and man corners, and usually they can't do the other. A good example, Nnamdi Asomugha in Oakland, man corner, one of the best in the game. Touted as one of the best in the game, goes to Philadelphia and the dream team, has to play zone coverage, gets destroyed by the lowest of the quarterbacks in the NFL. Some people simply can't make that transition. And that just goes back to my point of playing smarter. I'm not saying he can't do it. I'm not going to, after 1 year, trash a guy, especially a first-round pick who we have so much invested in. But I think if you're on the NFL level and people hearing me now or listening to what I say, you can see that I'm not an NFL coach, obviously, but that's my point. If I can see some of these things, you on that level of the NFL should be able to have the foresight to know that this simply isn't going to work out if this is where we're going. And it just goes back to my point of we've got to draft and do free agency smarter.
I just wish I'd have known what I was getting into, because I'd have brought a notebook, because I talk football for dummies on my show.
Well, look, here's the thing. I try to, and I've actually talked, and I might actually hit you up with it now, is I'm trying to get together a couple people, especially some of the Saints podcasters, to start training some of this stuff. And it's only stuff that's been taught to me to really give the fan a better edge, because to me, if you can know what's happening, most fans do this when they watch football. They watch the snap, they watch the quarterback, then they watch the receiver. I watch football by watching the middle of the field and just trying to take a grasp of what every single person is doing. And if you do it enough, you start picking up little things like you'll see it in my film study of Michael Thomas tomorrow. On the play action, I have no idea what type of defense the Rams are trying to run in this situation. I can't tell if it's a cover 2 or a cover 2 under. The difference being in a cover 2 under, the corners are playing man coverage. In a normal cover 2, they're in a zone. The reason I can't tell which is because 6 LA Rams players bite on the play action, and then Michael Thomas is open on a simple out and up route and gets in for a touchdown. Little things like that, then you start to see, wow, I can see how intelligent and amazing Sean Payton's play calling really is, instead of the average fan who gets to the point where, oh, man, he's just going to throw 3 shotgun passes and we're going to go 3 and out. We're going to lose the game. No, there's a method to the madness. It's just seeing the method. You start to understand, like, man, this guy really is one of the best in the NFL compared to watching another team like, say, the Browns offensive coordinator who is running nothing but a few slant routes and the A-gap run over and over and over because they don't have the ability to diversify. And I just really enjoy teaching the game of football. So that's why I get so into it in my podcast. I realize maybe not everybody is there yet, but I want to get them there.
No, I'm learning a lot. I'm entertained by it. But let me go to bat for what I would say would be the average fan, which was what I talk to on a normal basis. Everything you said, you've nailed it. I mean, it's awesome to hear somebody go into the football lingo and the X's and O's and actually talk about coverages and routes. I mean, it's just something I don't get to talk about on a normal basis with people. But I will tell you what the average fan can tell about Sean Payton. And you're one of the stats and tangible evidence. They can tell that, hey, guess what? The Saints are better when they run the football. About 50% of the time they throw the ball. They are better when they have a better running game. When the Saints throw the ball 50, 60 times a game, they usually lose. When they run the football and they have over 100 yards rushing and they're balanced on offense, it doesn't take a football genius to tell you the Saints usually win football games.
I had myself muted. Let me throw this one out there because you brought up something that I love, and I'll admit that the proponents against us on that argument have valid points. When you're a winning team, you get to run the ball more. However, I'll say this, and I've said it every year since the Saints missed the playoffs. No NFL team ever in the history of the NFL has won the Super Bowl running less than 411 times total in a season. And that was the New York Giants who did that in 2011. The average is 450. And when New Orleans won the Super Bowl, they ran over 120 times. We've missed that 400 mark for about 2 years in a row. This year we hit 404. So we're starting to go in the right direction. Mm-hmm. I'm a big proponent of balance. Now, we'll never be a running team under Sean Payton, ever.
And why would you with Drew Brees as your quarterback?
Exactly. But if you can run, to me, the magic number is 40%. 40% of your plays are run. And you can really see it, especially the second half of this season after Angry Ingram appeared when he got benched because Tim Hightower was about to take his job. Play action became something that we were able to utilize that we weren't effectively for a couple of years. We did use play action quite a bit all the way back to 2016, but its effectiveness has gone down. You would see, players knowing what was coming and not worried about a flea flicker out of nowhere or a play action pass to Ingram or even Pierre Thomas because they just didn't fear the run. But now that you've got a 1,000-yard back, a Pro Bowler, people have to respect that because, as you saw, this Ingram isn't just falling down after 2 yards. This guy's gouging you for 30, 40, 70-yard runs if you're not paying attention, and that'll kill you just as quick as the pass will. So I'm a big proponent of balance. You just have to understand a Saints balance is not 50-50. It's more like 40-60, but I can live with. And Brian in California says he's got one more. He's going to stop bothering us, but he's got one more.
Yeah, just a quick thing on Peyton. I actually love that you guys brought up the whole balance thing. I think that's it's the biggest narrative on, quote unquote Saints Twitter about Sean. And it's not that people are wrong. Balance is incredibly important. You can kind of use them as you can use the Patriots as the gold standard. They always have a running game. You look at the amount of touchdowns Garrett Blount's had this year, and he's not an upper tier back. But, and this is where the difference comes in, Sean Payton has never been averse to running the football. Sean will run it right down your throat all game if it's working. And that's the thing for me that becomes a problem. Like you talk about, we're not hitting that 411. We're not getting into the 400s carries-wise. Now, some of that comes on to the defense. When you're down 18 points and you're 15 minutes into the game, it's difficult to commit to a run game if you can't trust it. Because it is a game of attrition. If you continue to run, you will wear them down. But you have a defense back there that's going to give up a touchdown every time. And so the danger you run is if it takes too long for the running game to pick up, you put the game out of reach. And for me, the best, outside of a pass rusher, which has to be need number one, the biggest thing the Saints have to do this offseason. This year, I don't give a shit what ESPN's rankings say or what advanced stats say. Don't get me started on that. For the offensive linemen, the Saints' offensive line this year was mediocre. Now, considering the circumstance of that line and how much shuffling there was and all of that, that's a pretty impressive achievement. But they were mediocre. Mediocre lines cannot run the ball consistently. And that's what we saw this year. There were games where the Saints' offense looked incredible, unstoppable. And there were games, using the first Tampa game, Detroit as two prime examples, where the run game was destroyed at the line of scrimmage, and Drew, even if he wasn't getting hit, was pressured, moved off his spot, and timing was affected on such a consistent basis, the whole offense went to hell in a handbasket. And that, to me, offensive linemen, they're the guys, they never get the praise, but you always want to point them out when they do wrong. The Saints used to, at their prime, had an offensive line that was deserving of praise. You have to do a lot as a lineman to get praise. If they can get back to that point, I promise you, Sean Payton will have this team as one of the top rushing teams in the league. But Sean's a guy who's always going to play to what he thinks is the best chance to win. And when I have mediocre run game versus Drew, who I know can turn it on at any time, I'm going to lean on Drew. When the run game can be even consistently average, Sean will